Now, whatever you think the best way to deal with climate change is, putting that solution into practice, that involves politics as well as some tough choices when it comes to lawmakers. And that's why today, the perfect day to talk with former New Jersey Governor Todd Whitman. Whitman, as many know here, two-term governor of New Jersey. She was named EP administrator back in 2001. And Governor Whitman, she spoke earlier with Andrew Whitman here about long-lost relatives and the family tree.
Yeah, right.
No, but checked about a bunch of interesting things, and she had interesting things to say.
Well, we started with New Jersey politics, Rich, and the race to replace Frank Lautenberg in the U.S. Senate. I asked her if she got a call asking her to either run or seek the appointment. Her answer may surprise you. And also, we talked about why the Republican field doesn't include any names that New Jersey voters are likely to have heard before. Turns out she had similar answers, at least in part, to both questions. And part of the problem, she says, is the state of today's national Republican Party. I'm wondering why the bench for New Jersey Republicans seems so shallow and why bigger names didn't run for it. And does it have anything to do with the shrinking of the GOP tent that you warned about in your book?
Well, I think that's part of it. I think a lot of people looked at it and said, what am I going to have to give up? And what am I going to have to do between now and October in order to be a credible candidate? And but a lot of them are looking at saying, what this Republican Party isn't the one that I really believe in, and how well would I do in Washington with a leadership that looking for, again and again, more party loyalty than necessarily policy changes. And so people have said, I've got other ways that I can contribute, other ways that I can make a difference.
In your book, It's My Party Too, you warned that social fundamentalists were pushing the GOP too far. Is that hurting the party, particularly in what's considered blue state of New Jersey or neighboring New York or similar states?
I think absolutely. And when you look at the kinds of issues and debate that's going on around, let's say, immigration, I mean, we're going to become irrelevant if we cannot appeal to the Hispanic and minority vote. And yet those are people, they're entrepreneurs, they're hardworking people. They should naturally be Republicans. They should be our base. But instead, we're using language that implies we don't want you, we don't care about you. We're going to set up hurdles that are so high that there's no possibility of you ever becoming a citizen. And people look at you and say, well, now why would I vote for you? Why would I be part of this? If you're going to constantly be looking for ways to tell me I'm not wanted, then guess what? I get the message. And unfortunately, we're doing that more and more, and it's not just with minorities. We're doing it with women on some of the language that we use relative to issues like personal choices. And that, to me, is getting so far away from the base Republican philosophy of less government interference in your everyday life.
Vice President Biden the other day was talking about a conversation that he had with some Republican senators. He said 9 senators, when he asked for their vote on the background check bill, said, I can't give it to you because I'm afraid of Ted Cruz and Rand Paul. And I immediately thought of your book. Is that an example, do you think, of the warnings in your book coming to life?
Well, I'm afraid so. I mean, there's no satisfaction, and I told you so when this is the outcome, because I think it's very bad for the country not to have these issues discussed from a policy perspective rather than just a partisan perspective. And I do think that we have ceded too much power to some of the more extreme elements in the parties. And oh, by the way, don't get me wrong, Democrats are going the same way as Republicans have gone. As
the search was on for an interim senator, there were a bunch of Republican names that were floated. Tom Kean Sr. was floated as a possible placeholder. I'm wondering if your phone rang at all during this process, or if maybe you hoped it might.
No. It did ring, and I didn't want it to. Let's put it that way. No, I was not interested in that. It would have been a high honor, I guess, obviously, to have that kind of trust. But I have no real interest in, first of all, in doing it something that would be for an interim of 4 months. And I wasn't going to run for the seat. I have life the way I like it now, as long as I stay involved in policy. I don't think necessarily that the Republican leadership would have been thrilled to have me there.
Just to be clear, when that phone call came, was it an offer asking you if you would want the job, or was it asking for advice?
No. I got calls and emails and things from people saying, can we talk to the governor and raise your name? And I would say, no, thank you very much. I appreciate the thought, but no, thank you.
So it won't be a Senator Whitman. And from there, our conversation shifted to climate change and how to deal with it. We spoke about what can be done to try and stop all the flooding and damage we've seen lately, and why some homeowners living in danger zones should and may have to go it alone. We also spoke about stemming the causes of climate change and the politics involved in that as well.
Well, yeah, there are things that can be done in certain communities. I mean, Greenville and Manville, Greenbrook and Manville always used to flood, and we worked with the Army Corps of Engineers and built some dikes, built some ways to divert the water, and they've been better over time. The problem we have is we're facing storms of sizes we haven't seen before. And we have the 100-year flood every 5 years, and now it's getting even more frequent than that. So nature is changing. It's happening. We've always had climate change, but never this rapidly. And it's been part of our history, but on the other hand, what we are doing as humans, the way we change our land use, what we put into the atmosphere is exacerbating that natural trend to a point that we don't know how to deal with it. Where do we rebuild appropriately? Does it make sense to keep rebuilding in places that flood, about which we can do nothing, the ones right on the shore? More inland, you can do diversion projects, you can do dikes, and you can do some things along the shore. Obviously, we found that sand dunes really work. But there are some areas where even that isn't going to be enough, and I applaud Governor Christie for accepting the FEMA map even before it was finalized, because that was taking areas and saying, look, these are places that you just shouldn't rebuild, and if you do, it's going to be your responsibility and not the general taxpayer's responsibility to pay for the rebuilding. And that's, I think, where you draw the line.
Mayor Bloomberg just offered a $20 billion proposal to help insulate New York City from some of these storms. Is there the political will to get that done?
Well, I think they're going to be done on the state and local level, not at the federal level. The federal level now has gotten so dysfunctional as far as partisan politics is concerned. Everything's looked at through that partisan prism, not through the policy prism. So it's difficult to get anything done. But when you're dealing with a community, people can see the damage. After Sandy, people were hurt. People were hurt not just in New Jersey, Staten Island, and they're still hurting today, and they understand the magnitude of not doing anything, what it can bring, and we're starting to see people understand the cost associated with that. Not just, even if you were not near an area that got hurt, your insurance rates are going to be affected because of the fact that everybody else is going to be, the insurance companies are paying out so much, they're going to raise everybody's rates to a certain degree. So people are beginning to connect the dots, and they're seeing what they're having to pay in taxes to rebuild in places. And I think at the state and local level, they're going to be more amenable to taking some of these steps.
So where do you get the money from for the states or local municipalities to engage in those sorts of infrastructure projects?
Well, what you're looking at is a way, first of all, how you prioritize and where you prioritize. The states are getting some money from the federal government for these kinds of rebuilding, and you got to do it right. And then it's something that you weigh the differences. What does it cost you not to take the steps that are necessary? How much more expensive is that going to be? And therefore, is that then a place where I put some money, that I make an investment today because I know it's going to save me money?
And these discussions so far have all been about managing the effects of climate change, but there hasn't been that much conversation about the causes of climate change.
Well, these are serious issues. We have got to deal with them. If you don't even if you don't want to believe that the way that humans have any impact on climate change, that's pretty hard to stomach. We've still got to look for ways that we slow it down. We're not going to stop it. And we need to see what can we do to slow down our carbon emissions in a way that keeps our economy going. And those two things are not antithetical. In fact, they can and must go together.
You've got 6 grandsons. Let's say one of them is lucky enough to follow in your footsteps and become governor of New Jersey in 2050 or sometime around then. What do you think they'll be saying about climate in their time, and what do you think they'll be saying? What questions will they be asking when talking about our generation and what we could have or should have done?
Well, if things continue the way they are, they're going to say, what was wrong with this generation? Why didn't they step up? What skewered our political system to the point where we couldn't reach agreement on anything? Consensus and compromise are bad words. We don't use them. That's something that I don't believe that future generations are going to understand, because they're going to be dealing with the real consequences of our inaction.
There is a lot more that I covered in my conversation with the governor. Just head over to our Facebook page to see the complete interview. Rich?
What you take away the most, what surprised me was how many people didn't lobby for the job. In fact, when asked through an intermediary, said thanks, but no thanks. Yes, it was temporary, but I get the idea, even if it was for a year and change, people weren't lining up to be the next senator in New Jersey.
Yeah, I get that sense about other Republicans as well. And you know, Christy Todd Whitman's book in the mid-2000s was "It's My Party Too." You almost begin to get the feeling she might not agree with that statement anymore. The party seems to have gotten away from her.
I'm curious from your end, when you see what was always considered a good, I mean, she was made head of the EPA, so it's hardly she was some outlier Republican. When she feels frozen out of the party, she doesn't speak, she's not alone in that. I mean, the Bob Turners of the world, right? Let's face it, they have a hard time finding a place where they can be pro-choice or whatever the social position is that isn't in lockstep with a party and still have a place or still hope to have any leadership
Bob
positions.
Turner was pro-life. His problem there was redistricting. They cut the district. It was a minority district. There was no way to do it.
I know he was,
That was
but he's changed his
But
positions
he
on
couldn't
stuff
get the
over
Senate
years.
nomination for statewide. I mean,
Yeah, he didn't have the Conservative Party nomination.
Yeah.
He called me 2 days before the convention and said, hey, I want to get on the ballot. What can we do?
But let's face it, I mean, there's litmus tests even in New York, the most blue of states, where as a Republican.
New York's different because we have the Conservative Party and Republican Party, and that's been going on for years with various things. And same thing.
Which isn't helpful.
But I mean, just saying, there's a whole different discussion there. I think, don't forget, she was elected back in 1993. Same time Rudy Giuliani was elected. Same time I think it was George Allen was elected governor of Virginia at that point. It was a big Republican wave. It was the first midterm for Bill Clinton at that point. She got reelected. She did great things in New Jersey, economic development. And George Bush appointed her for Secretary of the EPA. Things change over time. She was always center-right at that point. She wasn't far-right at that. For a lot of people, I think
Ronald Reagan, his truisms where he said, about, what was his 13th Amendment, right? What was his, what did he call it?
11th
the 11th commandment. Speak no ill
It's been a long
of another Republican. Yes,
week.
yes.
And remember about the circular firing squads,
Yeah.
Somebody
These
else
things
has
happen.
a glass of scotch with a
Parties-
Democrat like he did, they'd probably be put in front of one.
Parties out of power have that problem all the time. I mean, that's one reason Bill Clinton was able to do what he had to do to unify the base back in '92. He was able to say, hey, we can't be the party the far left. He brought a more center, and that's what happened. Every party goes through that. That's just part of the growing pains.
Constitution, same thing. When we come back, we're going to talk about an issue.
It was a commandment. It was a commandment.
Oh, commandment. Whatever. We come back here. We're going to be talking about an issue that I thought was, frankly, DOA. That was the idea of a background checks, any kind of gun control. Well, you can talk to the Newtown families because they're the folks who made sure the issue has not disappeared on Capitol Hill. They were back there today pleading for change. Believe it or not, a lot of people think gun control could have a second act here. We'll talk about that after this.